So this past week we've seen a bunch of awesome new bikes announced for the next model year, courtesy of motorcycles' premier trade show EICMA. Personally, I'm always looking forward to seeing the technological features and advancements, and there were plenty of ideas both old and new on show. So in this video, I'll round up my favourite features, including these fancy looking new brake calipers from BREMBO, and at the end I'll give you my pick of the most techie new bikes. But before we get started, a massive thanks to Beeline Moto for sponsoring the channel. They make this awesome little navigation device which I've been using for years and absolutely love. So if like me you like your tech but you have an older bike, this is a great way to update it. There's a link in the description to my full review as well as to their product page where you can find out more. So first up we've got the brand new Moto GUZZI V100. This bike was built to celebrate 100 years of the company and there are loads of neat design touches. It's far more modern than anything else in their current lineup, with a TFT display, lean sensitive rider aids and semi-active electronic suspension courtesy of Öhlins. But they've also put a lot of work into the wind protection. Firstly, with an electronically adjustable windscreen, and that's a real bonus on a bike of this size. Normally you'd only find them on big touring bikes. But also there's these little side wind deflectors that are electronically actuated. They can move up and down by their own accord, and Moto GUZZI claim that the result is 22% less air pressure on the rider. They say this makes it feel much more like a big non-sporty tourer, especially combined with the screen being in its utmost position. But yeah, other bikes have wind deflectors. What's interesting about these is that the position is based upon both your speed and the riding mode selected. So at lower speeds I assume they'll be down so that you can feel the cooling effects of the wind when you're in town traffic, for example. But as the speed picks up, they pop out to reduce fatigue and keep you warm. There are no specifics yet about how the riding modes tie in, but safe to assume in touring or rain modes they're going to be more eager to pop up at lower speeds, or maybe even be permanently up. Now on to Envy AGUSTA, who launched a couple of new adventure bikes called the 9.5 and the 5.5. Now the bigger of the two will not only be available with a manual gearbox, a recluse clutch and the option of a quick shifter on each, but they also say an electronically actuated gearbox. Now gears operated by buttons on the switchgear are nothing new in the adventure market. Honda's Africa Twin has had the dual clutch transmission version for years now. Their setup has two sets of gears and two clutches so that it can smoothly go up and down the box, either in automatic mode where the bike picks the gears for you, or in manual mode where it's done on the switchgear without any clutch or shifter peg. This Envy AGUSTA take sounds like it'll be simpler, perhaps something like the modification used by many riders with a disability, so the Clicktronic or the Flat Shifter Max. These are electronic actuators that just operate on the existing shifter peg. There's no word on whether it'll have an automatic mode, but either way I'm super interested to see how it turns out. DCT is brilliant on the Hondas, so it'd be great to see other similar options across other manufacturers. Also hailing from Italy, we've got the BeMoto KB4 and KB4RC, which are both quite unusual looking bikes. A big part of that distinctive aesthetic is the huge banana-shaped cooling ducts that run right down the length of the bike. These are in place because the radiator has been relocated from its traditional spot at the front of the bike behind the wheel to under the saddle, mounted in a diagonal orientation. As such, to get enough airflow, it requires these two ducts with an exit fan at the rear under the tail section, which it has to be said looks super cool. The idea is that it can help with weight distribution, so the engine can be placed further forward and get more weight over the front wheel, but also the geometry of the bike can be steeper. That can contribute to a shorter wheelbase as well, and both will make it turn sharper and therefore feel more agile to the rider. It's not a brand new idea. Benelli, for example, used it on their Tornado, but it's great to see it resurrected here because it gives these two new bikes a real distinctive look and architecture, and we get plenty of more economically minded, regular, traditional bikes hitting the market each year. So I'm happy to see something a bit radical and unusual. Now I also covered this bike, the NAWA Racer, in my other video about the best EICMA concept bikes, and you can find that link to in the description if you haven't seen it already. But it's worth flagging up here again because I hope it presents a proper leap forward in electric motorcycle performance. You see, I've tested plenty of Zeros and Energicas and the like, live wire, and you always come back to the same conclusion. They're super fun for a few hours, and they're ideal if you're covering a fixed distance each day like commuting, but for truly going out for a carefree ride and getting lost and touring, etc., we're just not quite there yet, both in terms of range, charging times, and also charging station availability. It feels like we need a significant development in battery tech to make them more appealing, and it could look something like this. The NAWA Racer combines a regular lithium battery with their NAWA Cap Next Gen Ultra capacitors. They say the result is much better energy efficiency, improved charging times, and an extended life cycle for the power system. So from a relatively small lithium battery, about half the size of what we're seeing in other electric sports bikes, you can get about 100 miles of mixed range in town and on the motorway, but in stop-start town traffic alone, where the battery replenishes under braking, it can basically double. And it's not slow, they're claiming about 100 horsepower peak, and with the weight savings of that smaller battery, they're saying 0 to 60 should be possible in under 3 seconds. Finally on this one, it's a scalable system, so it could be used in all sorts of vehicles, including bigger bikes with even more range, or even cars. Now for that BREMBO brake caliper I mentioned earlier. They already mentioned it a few months back, but EICMA was the first time a proper physical prototype was on show. In short, the idea is that it houses some LED lighting as well as stopping the bike, and not only could you feasibly change the colour for your own aesthetic preference, but they could also be used to communicate some sort of data, be that the heat of the brakes, or as Brembo put forward, the location of the bike when it's parked. Kind of like how you can flash your car's indicators with the key fob if you're in a busy car park. I'm not entirely sold on this one. It seems like some of those features could be achieved with some simpler adaptations to the existing lighting system. But it is quite a smart looking piece of kit, and it would certainly suit a high-end motorcycle. So that's a run through of some of the best tech, but what about the bikes themselves? Who's achieved techie bike perfection with a new model? Well, for me, it has to be the updated Sports Touring H2 SX from Kawasaki. Not only do you get that incredible supercharged engine and some proper decent chassis components, but also for 2022 a front and rear radar system. That must make it the most advanced sports tourer on the market by a good stretch. The front radar gives you adaptive cruise control and collision warnings, and the rear gives you blind spot detection with a light in the corresponding mirror. And that's on top of loads of other tech like a new TFT dash, keyless ignition, tire pressure monitoring, a new hill hold feature, emergency brake lights, lean sensitive rider aids, cornering lights, and on the top spec SE version, some semi-active electronic suspension. I mean, you'll pay 24 grand for the pleasure, but it's truly kitted out with just about everything you'd need for some seriously comfortable and seriously quick touring miles. What a bike. I think this is going to be my last video about EICMA before we move to Motorcycle Live in the UK next week, and I'm also moving into a new studio space. Thanks to everybody for all of your comments and feedback over the last week or so. I think there's been some incredible bikes, and I can't wait to get riding some of them next year. I'd love to know which ones were your favorites, so let me know down in the comments below. And if you're new here and you want to see those videos as soon as they go live, then hit subscribe, and I'll see you then.